I don't want a useless old woman here while I'm pregnant, my daughter-in-law said, never looking up from her phone. My son nodded in agreement. And just like that, at 66, I was being thrown out of my own house. But what neither of them knew, the woman they cast aside would soon hold the deed to everything they thought was theirs. If you've ever been underestimated, pushed aside, or told you weren't worth anything, hit that like button right now. Subscribe to the channel and buckle up, because this is not just a story about betrayal, it's about how a so-called useless old woman turned the tables in the most satisfying way possible. You can almost see it in their eyes before they even open their mouths. The entitlement, the arrogance, the belief that they hold all the power. That's exactly what I saw in my daughter-in-law's eyes the day she looked me square in the face and said, "Since I'm pregnant, you need to move out of our house." Her words echoed in my head like a gunshot. I froze, clutching the edge of the kitchen counter, trying to process what she had just said. Our house?
No.
This was my house. The very home I had worked for decades to pay off. The same house where I had raised my son, her husband. The same home that held the memories of my late husband, the laughter of birthdays, and the quiet tears of long nights when life was hard. And now she wanted me gone. I'll be honest with you, I wasn't always the type of woman to fight back. My whole life, I'd been the peacemaker, the one who gave up my own comfort so others could have theirs. When my husband was alive, I worked 2 jobs to help us pay the mortgage while he studied to get a better position. I clipped coupons, patched hand-me-down clothes, and sometimes skipped meals just so my son could eat. Every brick in this house was paid for with my sweat and sacrifice. But standing there, listening to my daughter-in-law, this woman who married into my family barely 3 years ago, telling me I didn't belong in my own home anymore, I felt something shift inside me. She wasn't just asking me to move. She was erasing me. It started small, as it always does. At first, it was little comments here and there. When she and my son first married, I welcomed her warmly. I cooked for them, bought them small gifts, even handed her family jewelry on their wedding day. I thought of her as a daughter. But soon after, the tone began to change. She complained that the house felt too old-fashioned. She didn't like the furniture I had carefully chosen with my late husband. She wanted to repaint rooms that held memories of my child growing up. She'd sigh loudly whenever I sat in the living room, as though my very presence disturbed her peace. And then came the pregnancy announcement. You would think that moment would be joyful. I certainly hoped it would bring us closer. After all, I dreamed of being a grandmother. But instead, it became a weapon. "Now that I'm pregnant," she said one evening over dinner, "we really need our own space. It's not healthy for me to have distractions." Her eyes flicked toward me. I laughed nervously, thinking she was joking. But she wasn't. From that moment on, she made it clear that I was no longer welcome. The day she finally told me to leave was a stormy afternoon. I had just come back from the grocery store, carrying bags filled with fresh vegetables and her favorite snacks. I thought I'd surprise her, make her life a little easier since she was expecting. But as soon as I walked in, she stood in the doorway with her arms crossed. "You can't keep living here," she said bluntly. "It's not right. We need the house for our family." I blinked, confused. "Our family? I am your family." She smirked.
No.
"This is me, my husband, and our baby's home. You're just extra. And honestly, it's stressful for me to have you here. So please, pack your things and find somewhere else." Her tone wasn't just cruel, it was final. I turned toward my son, hoping, begging for him to defend me. He avoided my gaze. He didn't say a word. That silence hurt more than any words could. That night, I sat alone in my bedroom. The very same bedroom where I had once nursed my son through fevers, where my husband and I whispered about dreams we couldn't afford, where I had cried into my pillow after funerals and celebrated small victories. I stared at the walls, at the faded wallpaper my husband and I had chosen decades ago, and I felt my heart break into pieces. How had it come to this? How had I raised a son who could stand by silently while his wife treated me like a stranger? I should have been angry. I should have shouted, demanded respect. But instead, I cried quietly, letting the pain wash over me. And then something inside me hardened. I realized something they didn't know, something they had completely forgotten. This house didn't belong to my son. It didn't belong to my daughter-in-law. It belonged to me. Every single document, every line on the deed, every receipt of every mortgage payment, it was mine. And if they thought they could push me out of my own home, then maybe it was time to remind them exactly whose name was on that piece of paper. The next morning, I brewed myself a cup of coffee and sat at the kitchen table, watching them laugh together in the living room. My daughter-in-law rubbed her growing belly, smirking at me as if I were already gone. She had no idea. She thought she had won. She thought her pregnancy gave her power over me. But what she didn't realize was this: the very ground she stood on, the roof above her head, the walls she decorated as her own, all of it belonged to me. And I wasn't about to leave quietly. If she wanted me out so badly, then fine. I would leave. But not before taking something with me: the house itself. If part one was the breaking point, what followed was the fire that fueled my decision. After that awful night when she told me to leave, my daughter-in-law seemed to grow bolder, as if she could already taste victory. Every single day became a new reminder that she wanted me gone. At breakfast, she would deliberately move her plate further down the table, leaving me sitting at one end like I was some kind of unwelcome guest. If I walked into the living room, she'd sigh loudly and mutter, "I can't relax with her around." And the worst part? My son never defended me. Not once. He'd just sit there, his face glued to his phone, or nod along as if he agreed. That silence carved a canyon between us, one I wasn't sure could ever be bridged again. One afternoon, she invited her friends over for tea. I thought maybe, just maybe, if I baked something sweet for them, I could soften her heart. So I made my famous apple pie, the same one that had won my husband over back when we were young. But when I brought it out, proudly setting it on the table, she sneered. "Oh, my mother-in-law baked again," she said in a mocking tone, turning to her friends. "She thinks she's being helpful, but really she just doesn't get it. She doesn't understand modern living. She's stuck in the past." Her friends giggled. I stood frozen, pie dish in hand, feeling my cheeks burn. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw the pie across the room and tell her exactly what I thought of her cruelty. But instead, I swallowed my pride, set the pie down gently, and walked away. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just about pregnancy hormones or her needing space. This was about control. She wanted to humiliate me, to erase me, to push me so far out of my own life that I wouldn't even recognize myself anymore. And that was something I could not allow. As the weeks passed, her pregnancy became her shield. Any time I spoke up, she'd put her hand on her stomach and say, "I don't want stress. It's not good for the baby." If I sat in the living room while she was watching TV, "It's stressful for the baby." If I cooked a meal and she didn't like the smell, "The baby doesn't like that." If I so much as breathed too loudly, "You're stressing me out. Think about the baby." It was always the baby, the unborn child she used as her excuse for everything. At first, I tried to understand. I told myself maybe pregnancy was making her more sensitive, more irritable. But no, this wasn't hormones. This was manipulation. She had found the perfect way to make me the villain. One evening, after yet another argument, I pulled my son aside. "Please," I whispered, tears threatening to spill. "You know this is wrong. You know this is my home. How can you let her talk to me this way?" He avoided my eyes, staring down at the floor. "Mom, she's pregnant. I don't want to upset her. Maybe it's better if you find somewhere else to live for now. Just until things calm down." I felt like the air had been knocked out of me. My own son, the boy I had carried, fed, clothed, and sacrificed for, was choosing her over me. But what he didn't understand was this: it wasn't about choosing sides.
It was about respect.
And he had lost mine in that moment. I didn't argue. I didn't scream. I didn't throw things or pack my bags in a fury. Instead, I went quiet. Because when someone underestimates you, Silence is the sharpest weapon. I began pulling out old files, looking through drawers filled with paperwork. I found the deed to the house, the mortgage papers, and even the receipts I had kept all those years. Every line had my name on it. Not my son's. Not my daughter-in-law's.
Mine.
And with each document I touched, I felt my strength return. This was my house. My sanctuary.
My history.
My sacrifice. And if they didn't want me here, then maybe I would give them exactly what they wanted. But not in the way they expected. The final straw came one Saturday morning. I was sitting quietly in the backyard, sipping tea, when she walked out with my son. Her hand rested on her stomach, her tone dripping with smugness. "By the time the baby's here," she announced loudly, "this will finally be our home. Just us. No one else." Then, as if twisting the knife, she added, "We'll redecorate everything. Tear down the old wallpaper, replace the furniture. Start fresh, no reminders of the past. No reminders of me." I smiled politely, nodded, and excused myself. Inside, my heart was pounding. That was it. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to cry. I wasn't going to argue anymore. If she wanted me gone, fine. But she was going to learn a very painful lesson about what happens when you push someone too far. Because if she thought she could erase me from my own home, then she was about to find out that I could erase her dream of ever calling it hers. That night, I lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. I thought about all the years I had poured into this house, all the sacrifices I had made. And I realized something important. I didn't just want revenge. I wanted freedom. And I wanted them to really see, the consequences of their arrogance. So I made up my mind. They wanted me out?
Fine.
I'd leave. But not before selling the very ground out from under their feet. When the people closest to you betray you, the pain is unlike anything else. But when that pain settles, when the tears finally run dry, you're left with something even stronger: clarity. And clarity is dangerous, especially when it belongs to a woman who's been underestimated her entire life. That night, after her final insult about starting fresh, I sat down at the dining table with a pen, paper, and every document I had dug up earlier. The deed, the mortgage, the receipts, every single one with my name, my sacrifices, my hard work written in black and white. And right there, with the moonlight streaming through the window, I began to write a plan. Not a plan of escape, not a plan of surrender, a plan of justice. The very next morning, I went downtown to visit a lawyer I had used years ago when settling some estate matters. He was older now, his hair grayer, but his memory was sharp as ever. I sat across from him in his oak-paneled office, my voice steady, but my hands trembling slightly. "I want to sell my house," I said, "and I need to make sure no one, especially my son or his wife, can interfere." He studied me carefully, then leaned forward. "Is this about family?" I swallowed hard. "It's about respect. They think they own me. They think they own my home. But this house is mine, and I'll decide what happens to it." He nodded, shuffling through the papers I handed him. "You're the sole owner. You don't need their permission for anything. If you want to sell, you can sell. And given the current market, you'll walk away with a very comfortable sum." For the first time in weeks, I felt something stir inside me. Hope. They thought I had given up, that I was finally breaking under the weight of their cruelty. But inside, I was stronger than ever. A few days later, when they were out, I invited a trusted realtor to the house. We walked from room to room, her heels clicking against the hardwood floors, her voice brisk and professional. "It's a beautiful property," she said, admiring the crown molding and the sun-drenched living room. "Well-maintained, great neighborhood. It will sell fast." I nodded. "List it quietly. No signs in the yard. No public showings. I don't want anyone in the house until the papers are ready." She gave me a knowing smile. "A discreet sale. I can arrange that."
Perfect.
While I was planning all this, life inside the house grew unbearable. My daughter-in-law strutted around like she already owned the place. She'd make snide remarks about her nursery plans and tearing down these old walls. Once, I overheard her on the phone with her mother, laughing. Once she's out, it'll finally be our home. I can't wait to redecorate everything. It's going to be perfect. I bit my tongue so hard I tasted blood. Because if she thought this house would ever be hers, she was in for the shock of her life. But keeping a secret like mine isn't easy. One evening, as I was sorting through old photos to pack away, my son walked in. "What's all this?" he asked, eyeing the boxes. I froze, forcing a smile. "Just organizing. You know, in case I do move out." He nodded, relieved, and walked away. But the truth was, I wasn't packing to leave. I was packing to make sure nothing of mine was left behind when the hammer finally fell. The weeks dragged on, each one heavier than the last. I wanted so badly to tell them, to wipe the smug look off her face with the truth. But timing is everything. I couldn't ruin it by speaking too soon. So I waited. And while I waited, I smiled. I baked. I nodded politely when she complained. I agreed when my son suggested I check out retirement homes. And all the while, the realtor worked quietly in the background, arranging offers, fielding calls, and preparing the final papers. It was late one afternoon when my phone rang. The realtor's voice was bright with excitement. "We have a buyer. Full price. They're ready to close immediately." I sat in silence for a moment, my hands trembling. This was it. The house, the very home my daughter-in-law had been salivating over, the one she had treated me like garbage in, was about to slip through her fingers forever. And the best part? She didn't have a clue. That night at dinner, she made yet another cruel remark. "Soon we'll finally have our own place." No offense, of course. I simply smiled, pushing my food around my plate. "Oh, don't worry," I said softly. "I won't be in your way for much longer." She smirked, thinking she'd won. But inside, my heart was pounding with anticipation, because I knew the storm that was about to hit her life, and I couldn't wait to watch her face when it did. Some truths arrive quietly, like whispers. Others crash into your life like a thunderstorm, leaving nothing standing in their wake. This truth, the one my daughter-in-law was about to face, was going to hit like lightning. It was a Tuesday morning when the papers were finalized. I sat in my lawyer's office, pen in hand, the deed laid out in front of me. My name at the top, the buyer's name waiting below. For a moment, I hesitated. This wasn't just any house. It was the place I had raised my children, celebrated birthdays, cried over losses, and built a life brick by brick. But then I thought of her voice. "You're too old.
Too poor.
Too useless. Move out." And suddenly, my hand no longer trembled. I signed. Just like that, the house was no longer mine. But more importantly, it was no longer hers either. The buyer wasted no time. Within days, legal notices were drafted, confirming ownership transfer. The realtor assured me everything was airtight. My son and his wife had no claim, no legal standing, no right to protest. This was justice written in ink. And now, all that was left was to let her find out. It was a Friday evening when it happened. Dinner was barely on the table when the doorbell rang. My daughter-in-law, smug as ever, strutted over to answer it. Standing there was a man in a sharp suit, holding a folder. "Good evening," he said politely. "I'm here regarding this property." She frowned. "What about it?" He smiled, handing her the papers. "As of this week, the deed has been transferred. I'm the new owner. I'll be moving in soon." Her face drained of all color. "What?" she screeched, flipping through the papers as though her disbelief alone could erase the words. "That's impossible. This is our house." The man shook his head calmly. "No, ma'am. The house was sold by its rightful owner. Here's the documentation." She turned on me then, her eyes blazing, her voice rising like fire. What did you do?" I stayed seated at the table, my fork resting neatly on my plate. "I did what I had every right to do," I said quietly. I sold my house. My son came rushing in, alarmed by the shouting. What's going on? His wife shoved the papers into his chest. She sold the house. Behind our backs. She betrayed us. He looked at me, stunned. Mom, tell me this isn't true. I met his gaze steadily. It's true. And don't you dare call it betrayal. Betrayal is demanding your own mother move out of her home because she doesn't fit into your perfect little picture. His face crumpled, caught between loyalty to his wife and shame at what he'd allowed to happen. But his silence said everything. She lost it. You selfish old hag. You ruined everything. We had plans. A nursery. This was supposed to be our future. Her voice shook with rage, but beneath it I could hear something sweeter. Fear. Because deep down, she realized she had played her hand too boldly. She had counted me out, dismissed me as powerless. And now, the walls of her home were closing in. I leaned back in my chair, calm as a stone in a storm. You should have thought about your future before you tried to erase mine. This house was never yours. And now it never will be. Her mouth opened, then closed again, like a fish gasping for air. She had no comeback. No weapon left. Just the reality that her greed had destroyed the very dream she had been chasing. The buyer gave them 30 days to vacate. 30 days to pack up every smug word, every cruel insult, every false sense of entitlement. She stormed around the house like a caged animal, slamming doors, muttering curses under her breath. But every tantrum only made me stronger, because every sound reminded me, I won. As for my son, he barely spoke to me. His shame weighed heavy, but instead of apologizing, he retreated into silence. It hurt. God, it hurt. But sometimes, even the love for your child can't erase the damage they've done. And I had to remind myself, this wasn't just about him. This was about me reclaiming my dignity. One evening, as I passed by her room, I overheard her crying on the phone. She tricked us. I thought we had everything. Now we have nothing. And for the first time in months, I smiled a genuine smile. Because maybe, just maybe, she was finally beginning to understand what she had tried to take from me. 30 days came and went faster than anyone expected. Boxes piled up by the door. Laughter and arrogance that once echoed through those halls had turned into whispers, bickering, and muffled tears. My daughter-in-law had gone from a queen in her castle to a tenant being shown the door. On their last morning, I watched quietly from the kitchen as movers carried out the final box. She walked past me, her chin held high, but her eyes betrayed her, red-rimmed, watery, bitter. She couldn't even look at me. And my son, my sweet boy who had once built forts in the living room and whispered secrets into my ear, he avoided my gaze too. I wanted to reach out, to hold him like I had when he was a child. But the silence between us was a canyon neither of us knew how to cross. So I let them go. Sometimes, love means letting people live with the choices they've made. When the door shut behind them, the house fell into a silence so deep it almost startled me. For the first time in months, I could breathe. No insults. No demands. No one telling me I was too old, too poor, too useless. Just me, and the quiet dignity of knowing I had stood my ground. But as I stood there in the empty living room, I also realized something else. This house wasn't mine anymore either. I had fought so hard to protect it, only to let it go. At first it stung. I thought of birthdays celebrated around that dining table, of my husband fixing the leaky roof, of Christmas mornings when my son would run down the stairs in his pajamas. Memories clung to these walls like ivy. But then, I thought of the nights I had cried myself to sleep in this same house because of her cruelty. And I realized, maybe this house had served its purpose. Maybe it was time to move forward, just as I had forced them to. Word spread quickly among the neighbors. One day she strutted through the block as if she owned everything. The next, she was gone, dragging her pride and her bitterness behind her. It was poetic. Her carefully curated image of success had cracked like glass, and everyone saw the truth. She wasn't the powerful one after all. She had gambled with greed and lost. Weeks later, I got a call. It was my son. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. I could hear his breath on the other end, shaky, hesitant. Finally, he whispered, "Mom, I'm sorry." I closed my eyes. Those words, so simple, yet carrying the weight of everything we had been through. "I know," I said softly, "but you need to understand, sorry doesn't erase choices." There was a pause, then a choked sob. For the first time, I heard regret in his voice. And though it didn't fix everything, it was a start. With the money from the sale, I bought a small cottage by the lake. It wasn't grand, it wasn't flashy, but it was mine. Every morning, I would sit by the water with a cup of tea, watching the sun rise, feeling peace settle over me like a blanket. No voices telling me I didn't belong. No cruelty hiding behind fake smiles. Just freedom. I realized something powerful through all this. Family doesn't give someone the right to trample over you. Love doesn't mean silence in the face of cruelty. And age doesn't mean weakness. It means wisdom. My daughter-in-law thought she could erase me. My son thought his silence would keep the peace. But I proved them both wrong. Because when you try to bury a woman who has already weathered storms, you'll only find her roots run deeper than you imagined. Months later, I heard through a mutual acquaintance that their marriage was unraveling. The pressure of losing the house, the constant fighting, the bitterness that had seeped into their lives, it was too much. And though I didn't wish pain on my son, I couldn't help but think, karma doesn't miss. Sometimes, revenge doesn't come with fireworks or screaming matches. Sometimes, it comes quietly, like a door closing behind you. That was my revenge. I didn't scream. I didn't fight. I just took back what was mine and walked away. And in that silence, I found something I never expected. So here's what I learned. No matter who tries to push you out, you don't owe anyone your silence when they trample your worth. My daughter-in-law thought she could take everything from me, but in the end, she lost the very thing she valued most. If this story hit home, drop a comment with your thoughts. I love reading every single one. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share if you believe karma never forgets. Because here on Red Silk Revenge, the truth always finds its way out.